Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of Hardcore Realizations, the podcast. For anyone that's been following along with my Substack of the same name, I would like to thank you for taking the time to look at it, and I hope that you were able to gain something valuable from it. This was always the next intended step to take to provide a space for people who shared a similar story to be able to talk about their experiences. So it's only fitting that we have Jeff, who I have embarked on this endeavor with, be our first guest to share his story with you. So without further ado, Jeffrey, my friend, how are you?
Doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I am just in the process of moving across the country, and so I'm a little bit more stressed than usual, but I can't complain otherwise.
Yeah. Well, big changes. A lot of exciting times ahead, I believe.
Yeah, no, for sure. With
Be on my
that
coast.
studio time.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Coming up in a couple days here, I'll be flying out there, so I'm excited to see you in person.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
But anyways, so why don't we get into this? Obviously, we have some overlap in regards to music and hardcore. Um, and so why don't you give me a little bit of background on how you found yourself interested in hardcore, maybe some of the bands that influenced you earlier on that led in that direction?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. I mean, the first bands that really changed my life were probably from the grunge era. So obviously dating myself a little bit, but when Nirvana came out mainstream, that was huge for me. That was like, I think, my gateway into heavier music, I would say. Um, and then they were always promoting like other kind of punk bands like the Melvins and Sonic Youth and stuff. So I remember I'd see what shirts they were wearing and then go out and pick up those records. I think it was, as far as hardcore being appealing, Nirvana had that song Tourette's off In Utero. Are you familiar with
Oh
that
yeah,
song where he's just
oh yeah,
screaming?
yeah.
and
It's a good one.
yeah, when I first heard that, I'd never heard anything like it, but like it was just really appealing, you know. And I don't even know if there's lyrics to the song, but you could just feel the emotion, you know. And it was kind of like an expression of everything you were seeing in the world, you know, with the violence on the news and wars and stuff, and then also just the alienation of, you know, being a young person, kind of figuring things out and finding your place in the world. So Nirvana kind of opened the door for heavier music. And then when I was in high school, I was in class with a girl who um, was into a lot of hardcore before anybody else knew what it was in our school. And she made me a mixtape, and it had like Shelter on it, had Sick of It All, Snapcase, I think like Civ, Orange 9mm, and that thing just changed my life. So I think the first bands that grabbed me were probably the bands that sort of sounded like the alternative stuff I was listening to, like Shelter and Orange 9mm. Those were like the first shows I went to.
Sure.
But then I moved, you know, into heavier tastes, and you know, Snapcase was heavier, and Earth Crisis and things like that. So yeah, that's how I found my way in.
And what was it about hardcore in particular that kind of grabbed hold of you? Was there more to it than music you had come across prior to that?
Yeah. So I think like, well, the draw of Nirvana at the time was it felt rebellious. You know, like I talked about that song Tourette's, like he's just screaming, and this is like, you know, a mainstream band. Um, so that felt like super raw and real, and then hardcore seemed like next level real because it was still, those bands were still pretty underground, you know. So that resonated, and also there was like a message to the music. So whereas like with the grunge stuff, it was kind of like, yeah, there's something's not right with the world, you know? Like I think if you watched interviews with Kurt, you know, he's talking about the state of the world and things like that and how he just feels helpless. So all he can do is scream into a microphone. But then when you got hardcore bands, it's like they were screaming in the microphone, but they offered some solutions, you know?
Right.
So I got introduced to all the elements of hardcore, like straight edge and vegetarianism, veganism, like animal rights issues, and introspection. Like Snapcase was big into that, and environmentalism, Earth Crisis, and so yeah, it seemed like a more organized. Like there were some answers to be found, instead of just being upset and trying to escape it. And a lot of the grunge stuff too was a lot of those bands, you had drug involvement, you know? So uh, I think it was more of an escapism, whereas hardcore, then we're saying, well, no, we're going to keep our minds straight so we could think and kind of sort things out
Right.
and self betterment. And so, yeah, I think that appealed to me at the time. It was like more empowering, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. They like with hardcore in particular, it brought a certain focus on the message that I think a lot of grunge and punk bands weren't quite hitting in the same way. And so that's kind of what grabbed a hold of me as well. It's like I like the aggression, I like the angst. I never really was one to go along with um, I guess the more accepted narratives, and so hardcore kind of brought just a different approach to it. It was more upfront and clear and obvious what they're trying to say, rather than more abstract like some of the other bands that we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. And you had front people like Amakai and Ray Capo that were giving speeches and well, I mean, I wasn't old enough to see Minor Threat or anything, but you could I guess through interviews you kind of got the vibe of that he had some ideas that really resonated. And then when I started going to shows and hearing like speeches in between songs, and it was, yeah, it was very cool. You felt like you could change the world, you know? And you could also like just start today. You could just start a band and then and start playing out.
Segues nice into my next question. When did you start on that endeavor? When did you pick up your first guitar and start playing around with the idea of creating your own stuff?
Yeah. So I always had guitars lying around the house because my father played. He was a self-taught classical guitar player, so there's always acoustics around. Um, but seeing what he was doing on the guitar felt like pretty out of reach for me, and I wasn't like listening to classical music at that time, so I didn't have too much interest. And there was times I would have him try to teach me how to play something, but I remember asking him how to play Heart Shaped Box, um, and he just played some really elaborate classical version that included the vocal melody in with the bass and all the picking. And I'm like, oh man, I'm never going to do this. But then I went to a friend's house and he had a junky electric guitar, junky amp, and he was playing some Nirvana songs, and it sounded just like it. And he taught me how to play them. So then I was like, okay, this is possible. And then as I got into hardcore, you know, and I started playing that stuff, and a lot of it was simplistic. It was stuff that I could do and feel like, oh, I don't have to wait a long time to be able to start a band, you know, like I'll be ready very
Right.
soon. So yeah, I started playing with people uh, early on in like middle school, and then early hardcore bands once I got into high school. So freshman year is when I got into hardcore. And
Right. And was there a particular band that you started playing with that kind of felt different from the ones that you were experimenting with prior to that?
um, the bands I did when in high school, we didn't really leave the basement. So I guess, well, senior year, I was in a kind of old school band and we played our first shows. But as far as a band that actually started to kind of make moves and play out of state would have been Hamartia, which we were more metallic. At that point, I think I wanted a little more from the guitar. So I
Right.
started branching out into like metal stuff and trying to mix that. And the metalcore stuff was really popular at the time. So yeah, probably Hamartia, the first band that began playing out of state and kind of developing a bit of a following.
Right. And that's kind of where our two worlds converged essentially, because I was playing in uh the band for me that was similar, that was, impactful and started to actually play out and do stuff, was called Seven Angels, Seven Plagues. And we played a weekend of shows out east with you guys where I would have met you for the first time and the rest of the guys. But obviously our mutual friend Matt Mixon, had known you from your childhood. So that was our link. Um,
Yeah.
and then obviously that would lead into you joining Misery Signals for a brief amount of time when both of those bands broke up. Um, what do you remember from that era? Kind of like the decision processing and how you felt when we reached out to ask you to team up with us.
Yeah, that was a big deal for me. Cause Seven Angels, Seven Plagues was like one of my favorite bands at the time. And obviously I knew Matt, um, your singer. We grew up together, and he moved freshman year of high school. So we kind of were getting into the same hardcore bands at the same time. And um, which is cool that it then led him to meet you and start playing in that band. And I remember him sending me the record and just being pretty blown away by it. So uh, when you guys reached out about the new band, I was like, wow, this is this. It felt pretty surreal because I listened to that record nonstop, but it was also felt like big shoes to fill. Because I'm like, this is so good. Like, can I contribute and make something as good?
Right.
But it was a no brainer, and I guess I should say so. At the time, shortly before I had started the band with Honor, but we were having a hard time trying to find a singer. Um, and it was also known that a couple of the people weren't going to be able to like tour or really put too much time into it. So when you guys reached out, I was like, no, we're gonna do a band like serious. That's really what I wanted to do, was to tour. Um, so yeah, it just all kind of lined up.
Yeah. And then not too long after that, after we recorded an EP together and spent some months in Madison and embarked on our first full US tour, we found ourselves back kind of where you're from on the East Coast. And you gave us your notice that you were no longer interested in carrying on with us. Why don't you talk about what led to that decision?
Yeah. So um, yeah, we recorded the EP and we were doing some touring. And in the meantime, um, my good friends in with Honor, they had continued along and they had a fill in guitar player. And we had a singer. We found a singer right before I moved out to join you guys, and you guys picked us up at the first show we played. So we had found a singer like in a few weeks before, and then we played a show, and then you're at the show that we played. You picked me up, and I moved. And then somewhere in the meantime, like they had decided, oh, we can tour. We're going to kind of do this. And I think being out in the Midwest, I was feeling a little bit isolated, a little homesick. Not that we didn't bond, but like with Honor had my brother in it. So we had always done every musical project together. So I felt a little bit lost not being in a band with him. And then I'm seeing that you had the Morgan brothers together. So I think I felt like maybe I belonged to be back doing that now that they were going to do it more seriously.
Right.
So
Which makes sense. Looking back on it now too, it's, ultimately resulted in us um, bringing Stu into the fold, which had, a pretty significant impact on the band moving forward. So it's just kind of one of those things where, a door was closed when you departed, but it opened a new one for us. And so I think it kind of all worked out for the better in that regard.
yeah, and it's weird to think about. If I stayed, like, would we be here right now? Because we kind of went on and we had our own separate journeys, which brought us together now. That I don't know that things would have unfolded the same way. I don't know. I think we arrived at a good place. So
No, I agree. I mean, that's just kind of how I look at life these days, and kind of a more reflective state, and trying to make sense of how things unfolded, um, maybe a little more deeply than I would have thought about before. But so I guess after our departure, you would have went on to tour some years with Honor, and eventually, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started to experience some health issues at some point down the road. Can you kind of fill us in on what that looked like? Uh, I guess in the earlier point of that, how it started to manifest.
yeah, so the health issues would have actually started well after with Honor, and then the band we did after Ambitions, and so um, at the time when it started to occur, I think I had been working on a sort of grunge hardcore project with my buddy Keith, who had played the drums in Ambitions, but not playing out or anything.
Right.
And how it started was one day my right ear just started feeling blocked, and I just assumed, oh, maybe it's like wax or something, and so I flushed it out. There, it wasn't that. So then I'm like, maybe I got an ear infection. So I went to the ENT, and they're like, no, your eardrum looks fine. Everything looks normal. Maybe it's like something with the eustachian tube, like dysfunction or something. So they gave me a course of steroid to take for like 5 or 7 days or something. So I remember taking those, and I don't even think I saw improvement from those. But eventually, uh, after maybe a few weeks, I woke up in the middle of the night and my ear was screaming like the worst ringing I had ever heard. Like not like after you go to a show that's kind of loud and your ears ringing a little bit. It was like sirens in my ears, and but it was opened up, so there was a loud noise, but it felt clear, like whatever was blocked up was cleared. And then over a series of days, my hearing sounded really weird, and the noise kind of changed, and they started to subside. And then I was kind of back to normal. It's like, oh, phew, that was that was brutal.
Yeah.
I'm glad that resolved. Um,
Right.
but then it kept coming up again, so it became like a repeating pattern. As I'd be good for a certain amount of time, maybe a few weeks or a few months, sometimes, and then it would come back. But I would get struck more with the ringing in the night, and then it would wake me up, and then the the loud ringing would last for weeks. Um, and eventually, from repeated trips to the ENT, I started to get vertigo with that. So, like, I wake
Mm.
up for the ringing in the night, full volume, and then after that, I would get like the room spinning vertigo, um, and that would go on for anywhere from like, I'm trying to think, maybe like could be from like 30 minutes to like 4 hours or something,
Wow.
where you're just incapacitated. The room is spinning like 100 miles per hour. So
Right.
then, back to the ENTs, and then they're like, they did some tests, and they determined if you exhibit three symptoms, it's the tinnitus, hearing loss, tinnitus. So after the ringing, it would always uh, you lose some hearing in the process. So the way they
Gotcha.
described it to me was that you have a little sack of fluid in your ear, and that would fill up, and then it would eventually burst, and then the fluid would spill over the little micro hairs that detect sound and damage them. So you lose hearing after each time, and then that could cause the vertigo too. So I had the three symptoms. So then it was kind of like, okay, you have Meniere's disease, and so okay, so what do I do? They're like, well, some people have luck avoiding salt or large amounts of salt. So try to keep it under a certain amount of milligrams a day. And maybe they offered some more steroids or something. But there wasn't like a clear answer, you know? It's just kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
well, we know salt has something to do with it because fluid retention. Um, and so just kind of like, go try to live with it with that advice. So I got
Right.
really,
And I remember you, oh, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I remember around this time you made a trip out to stay with us in Portland. And I remember you being very cautious about what you were eating. And this is kind of the first time that I learned about what you were experiencing. And so, um, from that point, um, what did you know? How was this affecting your life? Like, were you able to play music still? Like, did you have a job that you were trying to maintain? Like, I would imagine that this had been going on long enough that it was having a significant impact on things.
yeah. Yeah, I kind of turned my world upside down because, well, one, I loved listening to music and I love playing music. And when you have one ear that sounds like there's like an engine roaring in that ear nonstop, then it's not pleasant listening to music, and you can't play music in that condition. So
Right.
pretty much I was removed from that, and then um, what also developed in that time was something called hyperacusis, which is a sensitivity to sound. So like loud noises and stuff could trigger worse tinnitus or even vertigo. So at that point, I was avoiding like going out I mean, I was living in New York City, so everywhere was loud. So I couldn't go out to eat. Restaurants were too loud. I couldn't go to shows. Any social, uh, aside from like maybe like a friend's house, a quiet thing with a couple friends, but I didn't even want to do that. So I was just I was sitting at home all day, just obsessing over this and looking for answers online and fixated on it and the sound and I started wearing an earplug all the time in that ear. Um, and Yeah, I was just kind of losing it in my relationship that I was in at the time that was suffering because she couldn't really understand it. And it was kind of inhibiting a lot of things with her life because I didn't want to do anything. So, yeah, it was just a very maddening time.
Right. And I mean, speaking as somebody that also deals with chronic pain as well, not only are you dealing with this pain that seems to never go away, but you're also worrying about how it's affecting other people, and you don't want to be a hindrance on anything that they're doing. And so, that for me at least, that really rapidly deteriorated my mental health as a result of the chronic illness because I was worrying about myself at the same time as I was worrying about others around me. And so I would just isolate and just, more and more remove myself from those social environments because I didn't want to bring the vibe down. I would assume your experience was similar.
Yeah, you feel like a real buzzkill, and you're always canceling
Right.
plans and you just kind of feel like I can't pick up normal life again until I have this figured out. So until then, I'm going to sit at home and research and wallow in my misery and why me and then until I am perfectly back to health, then I'll resume life, and what I would learn later is that's kind of the opposite of how the healing occurs, but um and you had asked before too like work life. So I was working
Right.
I was painting, not portraits or anything, but painting apartments. Um, and luckily, at the time, my good friend ran the company, and uh, he was pretty accommodating. Um,
Right.
though sometimes, yeah, I did kind of work for another guy too. Um, so I did have to work with the tinnitus, um, but like the vertigo was always a fear, and it was always a fear anywhere I went. Um, because eventually I had my first what they call as a drop attack, where it hits you out of nowhere. Like the other times, the vertigo would happen like in the middle of the night, and it would be kind of as tinnitus would subside for a while. So then I get vertigo and a spell of that for a while, and then it would kind of clear up for like a little window in there, and I feel a little better and just hope, oh, maybe it's going to resolve, but it never did. But then the drop attacks are like you could be walking down the street and then boom, it hits you and everything's spinning. So that finally happened once on a job. I was painting a bathroom at this guy's apartment in Manhattan, and I fell down. I'm like screaming, and nobody knew about the condition. So they didn't know
Right.
what happened to me. So they came in, and I had to explain they were going to call the paramedics. I'm like, no, I have this thing, and you're nauseous and stuff. Um, so I remember I just had to like sit there with this with the client for a few hours. I'm lying on his floor. He probably had other things he'd rather be doing. I had to sit there, and then one of my friends came, and as the vertigo started to slow down, she took an Uber in or something, and then rode back with me back to my apartment. But then I started realizing, like, man, like this is now affecting like work and social life. It's just, yeah, it's destroying my life essentially.
Right. And I mean, you have to think about things like driving a car,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, I'm sure that sort of entered your mind at this point, because what if it happens while you're doing something like that, or being up on a ladder at work, or all of these things that could be far worse if you were hit with one of these attacks, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was always super paranoid about driving, but I would have some indications whether they might happen, because I remember it was primarily in one ear, but when the other ear started to get affected too, it never fully went bilateral, but I would get some symptoms in that ear, and a lot of times I was more prone when it would be both ears to like a drop attack or things. But I do remember driving home sometimes, and probably not safe. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
situation, but because I also kind of developed like BPPV, I believe it's called. It's like a positional vertigo. So I remember driving back to Connecticut and just always being in the lane next to the breakdown lane, so that if it occurred, then I could quickly pull over and get off. But I remember driving back from New York to Connecticut to visit family. And there were some spots where there is no breakdown line, and just trying to keep my head as straight as possible and just focus. And I remember just being, please, please don't hit me.
Right.
So yeah, it was, there were some scary moments.
Sounds like it, man. Sounds like a crazy thing to deal with. So how long did this have to go on before you started to kind of look outside of Western medicine, which obviously hadn't really served you up to this point or made things any better?
Yeah. Well, the last ditch effort for Western medicine was, they say, there's a procedure they could do where they literally just inject the steroids through a syringe through your eardrum to help it clear up. And then if your balance is still bad, because also at that point, I mean, it just kept getting worse. So it would be vertigo, but then it became like I was talking about, the positional vertigo, where just my balance always felt a little uneven. And they said then we can sever the balance nerves, would be the next step. So I remember I went in for the steroid uh, procedure, and the doctor in there, they like clean your ears out first, but he like, I don't know, he did it too abrasively. He did something where he like cut my ear, and just blood was pouring out,
Yikes.
and yeah, he just didn't seem to give a shit. And I'm like, you just stabbed
Yeah.
me in the ear, dude. And so I remember after that, he left the room for a minute. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like, this is like, no thanks. So I left that place and she's like, do you need to make another appointment? I'm like, I'm not coming back. Look what he did to my ear. There was blood just pouring out, and there's people in the waiting room like horrified. And I like slammed
Right.
the door. I threw a little fit. And after that, I said, okay, I'm not going back to Western medicine. I'm not doing that. There's got to be some other ways. And then I started looking at alternative stuff. And, I really tried everything in those fields too, from acupuncture to homeopathy. And then, I was trying different diets.
So you were going down an alternate avenue and still not really having much results.
Well, I finally had some results. So I had found a message board with similar people, or people that had the same diagnosis, and everybody was talking about the supplement regimen that this one guy who was a part of the forum had developed. He was like a scientist, and so it was like seven supplements you could take, and then after a certain amount, it would start to clear up, and you could stay like without symptoms as long as you kept doing the supplement regimen 3 times a day. So I was carrying around a little pill container, and I think when I came out to visit you in Portland, I probably had that pill container. And
Yeah, I believe so.
yeah, so it was like lysine, because there was the belief that it was a viral infection and that they had found the herpes virus, which like the chicken pox or whatever virus that's dormant in everybody, like where it has migrated to the ears and affected it. So if you take lysine, it counteracts viral activity. So that was one of the things. And then there were some B vitamins and different things. So yeah, I took that, and that actually did mostly resolve things for a period of about 7 months. And
Yeah.
then it would stop working, and some people would have to up the lysine. So I'd start upping that. And then, so eventually that didn't work. And then I tried high dose vitamin C. I would reach tolerance at like 22 grams, which is an insane amount of vitamin C. And then take slightly under that regularly. And then that worked for a period, and then it stopped. So yeah, ultimately I just arrived at having no answers. And then also all these other symptoms started coming into play too. And so I guess before rock bottom, I would have the symptoms of Meniere's, the ear stuff, the vertigo. I would have chronic fatigue. I would have like all the pain points of fibromyalgia. I had developed sensitivity. Well, I had the hyperacusis sound sensitivity, positional vertigo. Anything chemical sensitivity. I developed. I became like sensitive to everything in my environment. Food sensitivities. What else? Like, heart arrhythmia, bradycardia, tachycardia.
My Lord.
Yeah, just everything on the list. Migraines.
Right.
So yeah, it's like if you don't get to the root of it, it's like it keeps knocking louder. So I was being pushed towards something.
Yeah, and so when you finally arrived at that rock bottom moment, what did that look like? And tell me about what that experience was like.
Okay, yeah. So I think about, there was like complete rock bottom, and then there was like a rock bottom that happened maybe a couple years before that one. So with like the chronic fatigue stuff, you'd reach a point where your energy level would just crash, and you'd just be bedridden. And I remember it would be a struggle to even go outside of my apartment across the street to the little bodega to get something to eat. And I was using a cane, and I'd have to walk really slow and keep my head straight. And I was so fatigued that steps were a challenge. It would take me forever. And like New York City, you're walking everywhere, and I'd have to rest for days to get enough energy to last me for a day, to try to get through a little bit of a work day or whatever. And I'd have to just eat just to get any fuel for the moment. So I'd have to carry around snacks and canes and all that stuff. That was kind of the first rock bottom. And then, but the major one was just as the pandemic was starting, um, I had I had another crash where I remember waking up one morning and just being super super depleted. Like I felt like death. Like my heart was like barely beating. I was slurring my speech, um, and I thought, okay, on top of my chronic things, I have COVID. That would make sense.
Right.
There's this new thing going around, so it's got to be what it is. So New York was all shut down, and I think we were shut down at that point. I'm trying to remember, or it might have been just on the cusp. But yeah, my roommate called the paramedics, and they kind of came and they're like, well, it might be COVID, or it might be, if you had some other stuff going on, might be something else. But if we bring you in to the ER, you will leave with COVID. So do you want to do this? Um, and yeah, I did ultimately go there, and they actually are like, actually, there's some ward in the back that's plasticed off from the rest of the place, and they got one open like spot. So yeah, they dropped me there, and the place was just full. They didn't have enough beds, times of COVID, and
Oof.
so I had to wait for a bed, like just in a chair, and then eventually they gave me the the drip, and I was completely
Right.
dehydrated and everything else, and then uh, so yeah, after the IV for a few hours, then I was like, I got some energy back, and then I was able to leave, and um, yeah, I mean, then I guess I went back into Western medicine for a little bit because after that, it turned into tachycardia where my heart was beating so fast that
Right.
it felt like it was going to explode. So I saw a cardiologist a few times. He was testing stuff. He couldn't find the problem, but um, he did say the word chronic fatigue as a possibility. So before that, I had all those issues that I listed, but I didn't know names for them. I thought everything was just Meniere's. This is just I'm run down from Meniere's. Um, so once I heard the word chronic fatigue, then I started looking that up. Oh, okay, that explains this and that. And I started uncovering this whole list of chronic things and invisible illness and stuff. So,
Right.
um, and that's around that time is when me and my roommate was helping. We came across a, a, some testimonials of people that had recovered from this stuff through rewiring of the brain. So, as soon as watching those testimonials and being like, rewiring the brain, how does that have to do with anything? Um,
Right.
that was like my ticket, though. Right away, I knew that was going to be the answer.
Yeah, that was kind of a gateway into another approach.
Yeah, and I guess I should say that part of why I knew that was right is because um, during one living situation I was in, there was a roommate there, and he said, "You know what? Meniere's disease. I had a teacher that had Meniere's disease, and he recovered. Uh, but I can't remember his name, so I can't get in touch with him to find out what he did." He's like, "But I just remember it was something really unconventional. Like it was something like he had to change the way he thought." And I'm like, change the way he thought. I'm like, huh, okay. Well, I wish you had his name. That's weird. I don't know what to do with that. So then when I discovered the brain retraining, is like, oh yeah, change the way you thought. So I knew that was going to be it.
Literally.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, yeah.
super. Yeah,
The connection was made.
yeah,
And so what did that look like? Once you kind of tapped into that, did you find some success? What did you learn along the way?
yeah. So um, kind of thankfully that was during COVID, so I couldn't go to work because everything was closed. So um, I was able to put the time while everybody was on lockdown into recovery. And I remember I really wanted to go back to Connecticut too, because I was bedridden, and one of my uh, roommates, or actually she lived upstairs from me, and she was like taking care of me, like doing all my grocery runs, or um, like she had helped secure the cardiologist appointments I had before. So she was really a lifesaver. So shout out to her. So I guess then I just hopped straight in. It was like you could do an online program, and it was affordable, and you just had to commit to maybe I don't know if it was like 4 or 5 days, like maybe 8 hour days, and you go through this whole course, and as I did, it was just man, like so many like I guess aha moments. Like it just
Yeah.
opened up like everything for me.
Do you remember the name of this course?
Yeah, it was called DNRS, the Dynamic Neural Retraining System. But
Okay.
like when I started learning that, yeah, it just is life changing. It was like everything made sense. Oh, that's why, and so you learn that the way they phrase it is what it is it's an impairment of the limbic system, the brain, which so the limbic system uh, is like the seat of the autonomic nervous system, and I believe it's like in charge for like sending the messages to the nervous system, which carries out its regular autonomous processes. But this this part of the brain, which is always kind of sensing if there's a threat around or what messages to send, can get impaired where it's stuck in an endless state of fight, flight, or freeze. So
Right.
essentially, it's always trying to perceive threats because it feels like you're always in danger. So by doing this, you could, if you go into freeze mode, that's your crash, your fatigue, where like play dead, like if you're being chased by a lion or something, uh,
Right.
it can go into, flight, so uh, your adrenaline levels up, or be trying to reserve energy in case you need to flight, so it's not, you're eating all this food, but it's not giving you the energy because it's like, we gotta hold on because there's a threat close. We might have to run soon, so,
Sure.
yeah, it just gets stuck in this mode. And so all the symptoms are to do with the messages being sent, and they're like faulty messages. So it would be like the check engine light on in your car, but not having anything wrong with the car,
Yeah.
So, um, but then, you have to say, well, why is my body in fight, flight, freeze? Um, and so you got to take a look at your thoughts, because where is it getting its information? It's getting its information from your thoughts and perceptions about the world around you, right?
Right.
So my thoughts were super negative.
Yeah.
So that was keeping me in sick mode, and I just had a really negative view. I mean, I think most people do. Just you watch a day of the news, what does that do do to your psyche?
Right.
So yeah, you really start to become conscious of what you let in, and what you believe. And with my health issues, I was always so attuned to these symptoms and these parts of my bodies, and predicting what was going to make it worse or what was affecting it. So I was just like always surveilling my environment. Oh, is this food going to make this worse? Or if I go here, is the sound going to be too loud? So I had developed this, belief that the world was this place that I needed to be protected from, and
Right.
so the limbic system was responding to that. And when you do it for so long, it just becomes normal. It becomes unconscious, So then the retraining is you got to retrain safety back into your brain.
Right. Because
So
your brain has just been rewired to protect you based off of where you're putting your thoughts, right?
right, yep. Energy goes where the mind flows, or energy flows where the mind goes. So that was
Yeah.
a key takeaway. But yeah, as I started to do the program, and they had all the different steps to implement, like one was becoming conscious of your thoughts, and choosing different ones, you know,
Right.
like who would think you could do that? Like instead of waking up and saying, "Oh, like another terrible day. How bad is today going to be?" Being like, "Well, what's beautiful about today?" And that was challenging because it it was in the COVID era where
Right.
there was an immense amount of fear. Um,
Yeah.
so
On top of everything else that already existed.
yeah, so things like, okay, well, I'm not going to tune into the news or how far this things have gone with COVID or whatever. I'm going to watch some comedy or something, watch a stand up, and I'm going to like make myself smile even though like I don't feel like that inside, because you that's going to send the message to the limbic system and the nervous system that things are okay, because you wouldn't be smiling and laughing if things weren't okay, right? It's they,
Yeah.
they they describe the limbic system like it's like the mind of like a 5-year-old. It's very simple, and you have to kind of speak to it like they said, like a 5-year-old or something. So like, um, yeah, like whatever I could do, listening to like upbeat music, and uh, just yeah, trying to like recover some joy in my life. And as I
Right.
did that, I did see it was like clockwork, like little by little, it started to improve.
Yeah.
And not, there were other steps too, but yeah, but just seeing like the progress from just doing that was like, wow, like this is so different from anything I encounter in Western medicine.
Right.
Um, such a different way that the world works that I didn't realize. Like my thoughts like make a difference, you know?
I know,
So
right? No, I mean, I can relate, not in the same way necessarily through the physical experience that you had to go through, but certainly when I started to connect those dots at a certain point and started to have some similar realizations, you start to have some small victories in the process, and you realize that there is a way out of it if you want to get out of it. And as you start to focus more on the wins that you're having in those moments, then it just leads to more and more. And next thing you know, a lot of the stuff that you're going through is a distant memory to a certain degree. And so it sounds like that kind of became the case for you as well. Once you started to see some progress happening, then you started to shift in that direction, and it resulted in more and more successes along the way.
right, yeah, they say focus on the wins, and once you do see that it's working, like it just you have so much more drive to continue, and you start seeing like a light at the end of the tunnel. And
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it's quite the awakening there, because you realize a lot of things just about how you carry yourself, and how you've lived up to that point, um, that you just were unconscious about before. Like I didn't realize that I was always rush. Like everywhere I went, I just couldn't slow down, and a lot of that's like being a New Yorker. But um, although I didn't achieve the New Yorker status, I would have needed another year or something. But living in New York, yeah, like you're always rushing around to catch this train or beat the times when everybody's going to be on this one, or so I found that I was always on that kind of mode. And what message was that telling my nervous system? It's
Right.
like, yeah, so
It's just
um
adapting to your environment.
yeah, and then the further you kind of dig into the retraining courses, uh you just start to become conscious of so many other things about yourself. Like I would realize, like, when times when my symptoms would increase, it was like, oh, it's somewhere where there's a part of me that feels discomfort here. Like the ringing was like a big indicator of that, or like saying yes, like people pleasing, doing things like being out of alignment with yourself. That was kind of like
Yeah.
the next step of like, so you could do the brain training exercises, you can keep your symptoms at bay. um, but then there's greater work that needs to be done after that, and that's really getting, to the root of all these things that you've been unconscious about your actions and behaviors, that actually aren't aren't healthy, and like establishing boundaries and all that, like all these things can lead to dysregulation of the nervous system. So,
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's like once you come across something that wasn't on your radar and you have some success with it, then you start to ask yourself the question, well, what else was I missing? You know what I mean? And you start to kind of expand on that. Like what kind of direction did you go after this point? Did it lead you into some other stuff that kind of played a role, whether it was happening before you knew it or not, that you started to look more closely at?
um, so the healing process for me, I guess, although I feel like this was running parallel for years behind, like the element of spirituality. Um, so when you start to do the work on yourself, um, I remember thinking like, man, the like from what the little I knew about Buddhism, I'm like, man, I feel like these illnesses, this recovery process going to turn me into like a Buddhist or something, like
Right.
trying to reach, these this peaceful state of mind uh and paying attention to, negative thoughts and negative talk, because you got to change your talk too, like trying to, like, there's a big part of it was like, yeah, changing your language, like obstacles seem as challenges, and for a reason, I had to kind of reframe the whole illness that this is something of growth, and then there were some forums in there where people that did the program would talk about different books and stuff. So um, one of them was Healing and Recovery by Dr. David R. Hawkins. So dove into that, and that's all about consciousness. And he's talking about changing his belief systems to heal from illnesses. So it kind of it was like next level from what I had uncovered through the program. So the program was kind of like, you have to change your core beliefs. So your core beliefs are the ones that are subconscious that you don't know are there, so kind of become aware of those. So like, for an easy example, that would be like, oh, the world is a terrifying, evil place, So um, you have to give the mind enough evidence to switch that around. So then the core belief underlying things becomes, no, the world is a beautiful place, So then you start having different thoughts and, uh, but yeah, well, he was looking at consciousness, and there were some really interesting things he was talking about in there. And just one thing was, he's talking about people with multiple personality disorder,
Hmm.
and how like one personality could have a set of like ailments, but then when the personality changes, those ailments aren't there anymore. Like one of them could have asthma or something. I think that was one of the examples. And then the personality changes and the next one doesn't have those the symptoms of asthma. So you're like, what is going on? So it really started to rattle my head, like the effects of consciousness. And then Joe Dispenza's name came up, and everything about the placebo effect, because that's a real thing. There's always a percentage of
Right.
people that don't get the real drug, but they still heal, and they could swore they got it. So why is that
Yeah.
happening? They believed enough in it that the body was able to kind of manifest it,
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that's you became you kind of sent me down a spiritual rabbit hole there, kind of changing my interpretations of the world and what is fact and fiction. And yeah. um
Yeah. I mean, that's again relatable. You know what I mean? Like again, through a different of course of events from my own personal experience, but it's funny how once I once I flipped uh, my worldview and consciousness all of a sudden became the fundamental element at play. Everything seemed to just fall into place over time and make sense in a way that I didn't realize was possible. And so, yeah, it's, I find myself in a similar position, even though we arrived here through different means of tapping into spirituality after living a lifetime of denying any existence of it. And,
Yeah.
obviously you can relate. That's kind of been a huge part of our transformation.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, it was just like a series of things around that time that were just blowing my head open, you know? So, um,
Right,
like other realizations, I could say. So I'm learning everything about the mind and the power of mind and like consciousness and say, oh, it's not coming from the brain. And there's that whole problem with science. And so going down that rabbit hole is fascinating. And then, so during my recovery journey, I told you I wanted to get back to Connecticut because I felt bad because I had this roommate that was doing everything for me, taking care of me, you know. And finally, uh, my father was like, "Oh well, there's a room here you can stay in if you can somehow, you know, like get things together to kind of get back here. You know, if you can figure out a way back, you can stay here." And they were all paranoid about COVID. Everybody was, oh, you know, if you have this or you expose, you spread it around, you know. And um, so I got good enough to the point where I was able to rent a car and make the trip back. And so as I was continuing my healing work at my father's, um, he's always had an obsession or like curiosity about, you know, is there life anywhere else than Earth? You know,
right,
um, is there intelligent life out there? And so he always was playing all these like UFO and like alien documentaries in the background. And you know, there are times he had shown me stuff a few years earlier, or probably around 2017 when all the New York Times article came out, and you had these military
right,
people, Navy pilots, talking about stuff they saw that they couldn't explain. So he was kind of watching this. So I'm doing my brain retraining one day, then I'm going in the other room, and he's got one of these things on, and I'm like hearing things of what, you know, what's being said there, and it, yeah, I don't know, like it, some of it starts to resonate, and and I start to think like, oh, maybe there is something to all this, you know. Um, so like, I guess the main case that kind of blew it open for me to make me start really taking that seriously, which was a bit of a consciousness expander, was the one case with like all these school kids in South Africa.
right,
That's all, you know, some craft and some beings land, and there was like 45 kids, and they all reported the same thing, and they had psychologists from Harvard down there, and he's like, yeah, these kids aren't exhibiting anything that would lead me to believe they're lying, and they're too young to coordinate such a big hoax, you know. So
right.
anyways, yeah, I got exploring down that rabbit hole too, and I'm like, okay, so like, just yeah, the whole world, my whole world is expanding now. You know, like I'm realizing that
Yeah,
there might be some bigger picture here, and reality definitely wasn't what I was told. You know, it wasn't as material as we could see with like the Western medicine stuff, and when you learn, you know, start learning about consciousness and yeah, and belief and
right.
stuff.
Yeah, which is, largely the conclusion that I've come to as well. Regardless of what it is, um, it all led me to just accepting the possibility that that just like you said, the world is not as it seemed that it was or how it was portrayed to us throughout most of our lives. And once you kind of open that door up, um, you get to kind of explore the world with new eyes and kind of see what is actually possible out there that has been kept from you or has been ridiculed or dismissed as magical thinking. But you always have the opportunity to make a different choice in life, regardless of what the circumstance is that you find yourself in, and just by making the choice to be open to some of this stuff, really
Right.
changed everything.
Right. Yeah, and it's yeah, everything's about your openness and I don't know, like you can choose the lens in which to view the world, like and I think the we've kind of been given one lens to um our upbringing and society and whatever, and we're kind of in this box that was inherited, I guess you'd say. And so yeah, when you really start to question that, um the world becomes new again. And yeah, you realize that the current society and systems don't have all the answers, or if they do, they're not being forthright with them.
Right.
um so uh and I gotta say, with the brain retraining, like at that time it wasn't so widespread. Like now, like that stuff, neuroplasticity is what's it's
Right.
primarily called. I mean, that stuff's everywhere now, and everybody's talking about nervous system regulation, um, and yeah, brain rewiring. But at that time, it wasn't getting a lot of attention. Like
Right.
so. Yeah, you are seeing as things evolving, in the fields of how the body works and what we really know about that, and the different
Right.
uh yeah, like the stuff that was labeled woo woo, like maybe it's not, and all the energy work and different things and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm seeing that be taken more seriously now, so it's exciting.
Yeah, it's good that the stigma is kind of being removed to a large degree, and people can talk about this stuff without having to worry about being judged by their peers and the people around them. Which is the kind of the case in throughout history, right? Like any of these concepts that are viewed as new concepts often will be dismissed with prejudice until eventually they're proven to be true, or that there's at least something there that was being overlooked. But
Yeah, 100%.
so what's I mean, well, thank you for telling that story. Like obviously it's quite a story to tell, and it sounds like a very difficult one to get through. But it seems like you're obviously doing better now. Like what does life look like for you now? You know what I mean? Like as far as like struggles that you still deal with, and I guess maybe in like a creative way too. Like now that you have some of these abilities back and you've made some improvements, are you writing music? Are you playing live? Are you having more success with that stuff? Being able to gain access back to some of your passions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could actually expand on that a decent amount. So yeah, I was able to, I would say, make a full recovery from all the fatigue and all the other um, symptoms. The pains and sensitivities and things. I was able to retrain from all that. My biggest obstacle is that's left is the ringing in the ears, which light years better than it was before. Like,
Right.
um, I mean, it kind of turned into like a kind of a pulsatile tinnitus where you can kind of feel like how your heart's beating, like the blood going through, but like not to a degree that's life ruining. you know
Right.
um and there's times where that's just dissipates, and I don't really get much, and there's times when tinnitus will spike or things. But the good thing now is when that happens, I can say, okay, well, what's the message that it's sending? What is out of alignment with me right now? Or like, what have my thoughts been like, am I stressing over something, whatever. So um, once you once you don't fear it, you can observe it like with neutrality, decipher the message, and then you can kind of make the little changes to correspond with what the message is. So yeah, now like it it never gets it's never going to get bad like it was, you know.
Right.
Um, and also like I mean, healing I feel like is just this kind of an endless journey. Like I'm starting to become conscious of like during the day, like, oh, am I holding tension somewhere like in my body that I don't even realize? Because we don't stop and realize that, like a lot of times we are like holding tensions in different areas, um, whether it be like in the jaw or like the abdomen or whatever. So like I'll find myself doing that, or maybe I'm like breathing, like holding my breath sometimes, or uh, there's just yeah, it's like that work on the nervous system, like I'm still figuring out things that I wasn't conscious of that I do, um so yeah, so just really dealing with the tinnitus here and there, but I can play music again.
Yeah.
um and when I talk about some kind of aha moments, uh where things like, so when I'm learning about everything in the recovery journey, I thought back to some times when during that span when like I would be really good and the symptoms were kind of gone, And there were times I was like super elevated, my mood, and I was like really present, So presence was like really important when I'm like completely in a moment and I'm not even paying attention to symptoms or anything. So what I realized that playing music, when you play a show, you are completely present, and you're completely in the moment. So when I finally got recovered well enough to play a show, the first show for me back was Furnace Fest in 2021. Did
Hmm.
Mystery Singles play that one?
No, we ended up canceling. We were
Oh,
still a
oh, he
little
played
bit
it next year.
weary of the. Yeah, we ended up playing the next year instead.
Okay, so yeah, that was well. We played one show the day before in like Nashville. So, but those were like my two big things. And it's funny because when I'm doing the program, it's like you do these visualization meditations and you visualize yourself doing something in the future that right now seems so far away. And so I visualize playing because Furnace Fest was supposed to be 2020 and then it got pushed to 2021, which actually gave me the
Right.
time to heal. But so yeah, I would visualize being able to play and do it. And then when it actually did, I remember like I was still a little weary about the sound if that would affect me, And so I remember I had like headphones on, I had a hoodie to kind of hide them, like earmuffs, and earplugs. But like I remember playing and just being able to like release everything, release all that tension, whatever tension or trapped uh, stress, emotion was in me. And like after I played the set, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel great. It's like the opposite. I thought like the ringing would be worse, and then it would be maybe another recovery. But I tried to keep the the expectations positive. But yeah, it was like night and day. So now, like if I play a show, it's funny how many times I'll finish and I'm like, wow, this is like the quietest my ears have been. And I was just in a
Right.
loud room playing something, but I was, my mood was elevated and I was completely present for a half an hour. And there's, just the power of connection with other people and stuff. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, like really. And I think about when I got sick, I wasn't playing anymore. So I didn't have that release. I feel like I always used to depend on that, That would be the
Right.
clean out, Like I build and hold so much stress and tension in me. Then I release it at the show, I'd start over, And yeah, so there is some healing there with through playing, playing the music and especially being so active, you're jumping around and releasing so much
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah. That must have been quite the experience to get access back to that kind of feeling that you maybe thought that you'd never be able to access again. So I mean, I think it's a good place to kind of start to close things up on a high note. Um, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here and ask you one final question, which you may already have answered before I even got the chance to ask it. But if the version of yourself now, knowing what you know, could go back in time to an earlier point in your life when you were a kid, or maybe when you were first picking up that guitar, and relay a message to that former version of yourself, what message would you give yourself?
Yeah, a lot of my healing journey has made me realize that as we get older and you move into adulthood, there's these expectations from society that you have to lose um, things that moved you as a child. Like you have to start becoming realistic, and you have to kind of give up uh, things you're passionate about. Like I think that's it's you're being forced out of alignment, and so the healing journey. And this was part of the class too. They say, they would say, think back to that person you were as a child, and what are the words that would describe that child, and uh, what is that child interested in? What are the child's dreams and stuff? And you're trying to regain that, regain the kind of the way of seeing the world through the eyes of a child, where you're filled with wonder and excitement and possibilities and pursuing passions. So I would kind of say never lose that.
Right. Yeah, hold
Um,
on to that.
yeah, always stay aligned. I think don't lose yourself, because I think as a kid, I think we have opened hearts, and we're more loving, as a child, and then we're told, oh no, this world, it's dog eat dog, and it grinds you down, and you gotta abandon this, or these things are weakness, and blah blah blah. And I think, yeah, when you lose that, uh, you're losing elements of yourself, and then you wind up having to go through the healing work and get back in touch with it, and so
Right.
yeah, like never, yeah, your childhood imagination is so precious,
Right.
so yeah, hang on to that.
Well, I think that's a beautiful message to close with. And, like one that would probably make this life that we experience a whole lot easier. But then I guess at the same time, the struggles that we go through are oftentimes necessary as well in order to get us back to that place. So, yeah. Well, thank you
Cool.
for spending an afternoon with me and sharing your story. One that I've become intimately familiar with, and that had quite an effect on my own story. And so, thank you for everything that you've done for me and also sharing with the world.
Hey, thanks for being open, and yeah, no, I'm glad to help, and anyone listening, or anyone that is dealing with anything, like I hope something I said maybe helps. So thanks for giving me the opportunity with this interview.
Right. All right. Well, I love you, buddy, and we will talk soon. I'll see
Love
you
you
in a
too, man.
couple days here. All
Looking
right.
forward to it.